Imagine a version of baseball where home runs almost never happened. A version of the game where a single run could decide an entire afternoon, and where stepping into the batter's box meant risking your life literally. This was not an exaggeration. This was America's pastime for nearly 2 decades, and it was a version of the sport so unforgiving that it nearly destroyed the men who played it. This was the Deadball Era. In the early 20th century, baseball looked nothing like the modern game fans know today. There were no towering home runs sailing into the stands, no bat flips, and no celebrations after a big hit. Instead, baseball was quiet, tense, and relentlessly unforgiving. Every run mattered. Every mistake carried enormous consequences. And every at-bat came with genuine danger. Players took the field without helmets, without meaningful protective equipment, and without any real concern for their safety from league officials. Pitchers dominated the game completely. Hitters struggled simply to survive each plate appearance. Injuries were not viewed as unfortunate accidents. They were accepted as part of the job. This period came to be known as the Deadball Era, defined by impossibly low scores, brutal playing conditions, and a style of play that pushed the human body to its absolute limits. This is not just the story of an old version of baseball. It is the story of how the game nearly destroyed the men who loved it, before tragedy finally forced everything to change. To truly understand the Deadball Era, you must first understand America at the turn of the century. The early 1900s were a time of explosive industrial growth. Cities expanded rapidly. Factories dominated the landscape and controlled daily life. Most jobs demanded exhausting physical labor, often in dangerous conditions. Life was hard, relentless, and unforgiving, and baseball reflected that reality perfectly. For working-class Americans, baseball was not entertainment built on spectacle. It was a strategic battle, a test of endurance, discipline, and mental toughness. Games were slow and methodical. Teams focused obsessively on avoiding mistakes rather than creating excitement. Fans didn't come to the ballpark expecting fireworks. They came to watch precision, intelligence, and grit. Winning by a single run was normal. Many games ended 1-0 or 2-1. Every pitch carried weight. Every decision mattered. Baseball was a thinking person's game, played in an environment where survival often mattered more than glory. One of the most shocking aspects of the Deadball Era was the near-total absence of power hitting. Home runs were not just rare, they were almost non-existent. In some seasons, league leaders finished with fewer than 10 home runs. Entire teams would go weeks without hitting a single ball over the fence. That wasn't because players lacked strength or talent. It was because the game itself was designed to eliminate power. Ballparks were enormous, with outfield dimensions that would be considered absurd today. Deep fences punished even well-struck fly balls. But the greatest obstacle to a fence wasn't the stadiums. It was the baseball itself. During the Deadball Era, a single baseball was often used for an entire game. As innings passed, that ball became scuffed, misshapen, and soaked with dirt, sweat, and sometimes even tobacco juice. Its white surface slowly turned dark brown, making it incredibly difficult to see, especially in late afternoon shadows or under primitive lighting. A baseball in that condition simply could not travel. The physics worked against it. Even perfectly struck balls died in the air, falling harmlessly into outfielders' gloves. Power meant nothing. Strength meant nothing. Contact, speed, and strategy ruled everything. Because power hitting was essentially useless, teams developed an entirely different approach known as small ball. The objective was not to hit the ball far, but to place it carefully. Batters focused on bunting, hitting behind runners, and exploiting even the smallest defensive mistakes. Speed became more valuable than strength. Base stealing was constant and aggressive. Players took daring leads, challenging pitchers and catchers on nearly every pitch. Sacrifice bunts were routine, even early in close games. Managers willingly traded outs if it meant advancing a runner into scoring position. In a game where runs were so scarce, manufacturing even a single run was worth almost any cost. This style of baseball demanded extraordinary discipline and intelligence. Every player had a role. Every play was part of a larger plan. Games felt like extended chess matches, where one mental mistake could decide the outcome. It wasn't flashy, but it was cerebral, demanding, and relentless. If hitters were merely surviving, pitchers were thriving. The deadball era was the golden age of pitching dominance. Pitchers were allowed to manipulate the baseball in ways that would result in immediate suspension today. Spitballs, mudballs, and deliberately scuffed pitches were legal and common. Pitchers rubbed dirt, saliva, and tobacco juice into the ball to alter its movement. The result was unpredictable, late-breaking pitches that were nearly impossible to hit cleanly. Because the ball was already dark and damaged, these tricks made it even harder to track. Some pitches were nearly invisible until they were directly on top of the hitter. Pitchers threw inside aggressively and without apology. Intimidation was part of the strategy. Fear was a weapon. There were no pitch counts, no workload restrictions. Star pitchers were expected to throw complete games regularly, sometimes both games of a doubleheader. Fatigue was ignored. Pain was endured. Pitchers were kings, and the rules were written entirely in their favor. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of the deadball era was the complete lack of safety equipment. Batting helmets did not exist. Most players didn't even wear gloves designed for protection. Catchers wore minimal gear. Being hit by a pitch was considered an occupational hazard, no different from getting injured on a factory floor. The reality was terrifying. Dark, misshapen baseballs traveled at speeds approaching 90 miles per hour toward batters with no head protection, in an era where pitchers were encouraged to throw inside. Injuries were constant: broken fingers, shattered faces, severe concussions, all accepted without complaint. Medical knowledge was limited, and teams rarely prioritized player health. You played hurt, or you didn't play at all. Hitters had only a fraction of a second to react. If they didn't see the ball clearly, and often they couldn't, the consequences were devastating. Careers ended. Lives were altered forever. Yet the game continued this way, year after year, with little concern from league officials. Danger became normalized. Risk became expected. Tragedy felt inevitable. By the late 1910 seconds, pressure for change was building. Fans wanted more excitement. Owners watched attendance stagnate. Players were reaching the limits of what their bodies could endure. But real change required more than pressure. It required a catalyst, something so shocking that the old ways could no longer be defended. That moment came in August of 1920. During a routine afternoon game between the Cleveland Indians and the New York Yankees, Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman stepped into the batter's box. He was 29 years old, well-liked, a new father, just a regular player doing his job. Yankees pitcher Carl Mays delivered a pitch. The ball was dark, scuffed, nearly invisible in the afternoon light. Chapman never saw it. The pitch struck him in the temple. He collapsed instantly and never regained consciousness. 12 hours later, Ray Chapman was dead, the first and only player to die from injuries sustained during a Major League Baseball game. The baseball world was devastated. More importantly, it was forced to confront a reality it had ignored for decades. The game had killed a man, and everyone knew it could happen again. Ray Chapman's death forced immediate change. Baseball reformed the ball itself. Multiple balls were used per game. Any ball that became scuffed or discolored was removed. Doctored pitches were outlawed. With clean, visible baseballs, hitters could finally see what they were swinging at, and offense exploded. Home runs became common. Fans returned. The game opened up. Into this new era stepped Babe Ruth, who in 1920 hit 54 home runs, more than most entire teams had hit in previous seasons. Baseball became safer, more exciting, and more entertaining. Protective equipment slowly improved. Player safety finally mattered. The deadball era was over, and baseball would never return to those dark days. The deadball era is more than a forgotten chapter in baseball history. It represents the sport at its most raw, most unforgiving, and most dangerous. It shows how rules and tradition can shape lives, and how resistance to change can kill. Every helmet worn today exists because of what happened back then. Every clean baseball is a reminder of how dangerous the game once was. This was baseball before mercy, before protection, before power. This was the Deadball Era.